Dr. Maya Collins pressed her face against the small window of the transport ship as it descended through the thick purple clouds of Cathara Prime. The planet below looked beautiful and deadly at the same time. Dense forests of silver trees stretched across rolling hills, while strange crystal formations jutted up from the ground like frozen lightning bolts. Maya had dreamed of this moment for 3 years. She was finally going to study alien plants and animals on a real Deathworld. Her hands shook with excitement as she gathered her research equipment. The other passengers on the transport gave her worried looks. They all knew what happened to the last research team that came to this planet. Captain Linda Torres stood at the front of the transport bay checking her weapons for the 10th time. She was a tall woman with scars on her arms and a permanent frown on her face. The Marines under her command looked just as serious. They had fought aliens before and survived. Maya had only worked with plants in Earth laboratories. The transport landed with a heavy thud that made Maya grab her seat. Through the speakers came the voice of the pilot, telling everyone to prepare for exit. Maya picked up her heavy pack full of scientific tools and followed the Marines toward the exit ramp. The air outside hit her like a warm blanket. It smelled sweet like flowers, but with a strange metallic taste that made her nose tingle. The gravity was lighter than Earth, which made each step feel like a small bounce. Maya looked around at the alien landscape with wide eyes, while the Marines spread out in defensive positions. Waiting for them near the research station were 3 figures that made Maya gasp in wonder. The Velinari looked like elves from old Earth stories, but more beautiful and strange. Their skin had a faint blue glow and their hair moved like it was underwater even though there was no wind. Crystal patterns grew along their arms and faces that sparkled in the alien sunlight. The tallest of the 3 stepped forward. His crystal patterns were silver and formed complex geometric shapes across his forehead. When he spoke, his voice sounded like music, mixed with the ringing of bells. High. Researcher Zephyron Silverbow had been studying humans for months through video transmissions. He found them crude and violent compared to his peaceful people. The weapons they carried and their aggressive movements confirmed everything he believed about these primitive creatures from the death world called Earth. Maya walked up to the Velinari delegation, while the Marines stayed back. She had studied their language and customs during the long journey to Cathara Prime. She placed her hands together and bowed slightly in the traditional Velinari greeting. Zephyrin felt surprised by this gesture. Most humans he had observed were rude and demanding. This small female showed proper respect for Velinari customs. Her movements were gentle and non-threatening. Unlike the armed soldiers behind her, the other 2 Velinari were researchers, named Lirelei Moonwhisper and Celestine Starweaver. Lirelei was young by Velinari standards, with crystal patterns that changed color based on her emotions. Right now they showed nervous blue swirls as she studied the human weapons. Celestine was older and her patterns had turned cold white, which meant she disapproved of something. Maya tried to speak in the Velinari language, but her pronunciation was terrible. The 3 aliens looked at each other with what might have been amusement. Zephyrin switched to heavily accented English to spare everyone the embarrassment. He explained that the research station had been built in a safe zone protected by energy barriers. The barriers kept out most of the dangerous creatures that lived in the forests. Most, but not all. 3 researchers had died in the past year when something big had broken through the defenses. Captain Torres interrupted the conversation by pointing at her Marines. She told everyone that her soldiers would be patrolling the perimeter at all times. Any alien creature that came near the station would be shot on sight. The safety of human personnel was her only concern. Maya felt embarrassed by the captain's harsh words. She could see the Velinari becoming more distant and cold. Their crystal patterns shifted to unfriendly colors. This was not how she wanted to start building relationships with the alien scientists. Over the next few days, Maya settled into her work routine. The research station was built like a fortress with thick walls and automated defense systems. Inside were laboratories filled with equipment for studying alien biology. Maya set up her workspace near a large window that looked out into the forest. The Velinary researchers kept their distance from the humans. They worked in a separate building, connected by covered walkways. Maya tried several times to start conversations, but they always found excuses to leave quickly. Only Lirale seemed slightly interested in talking, but the older researchers always called her away. Maya spent her mornings collecting plant samples from the safe zone around the station. The Velinary had cleared most of the dangerous flora, but some interesting specimens remained. She found flowers that glowed when touched, and vines that moved away from her approach. Each discovery filled her with joy, even though she had to work alone. The Marines thought Maya was too trusting and careless. She walked around the forest without weapons, and knelt down to examine every strange plant or insect. Sergeant Kate Murphy warned her that this planet had killed tougher people than a botanist from Earth's agricultural division. One morning while collecting samples, Maya heard strange sounds coming from deeper in the forest. The sounds were like a cross between purring and singing. Following protocol, she should have reported it immediately and returned to the station. Instead, her scientific curiosity took over. Maya followed the sounds through the silver trees. The forest grew darker as the canopy blocked out more sunlight. Strange flowers hung from branches above her head, releasing spores that sparkled like glitter. The ground was soft and covered with plants that looked like cushions. She found the source of the sounds in a small clearing. A group of 6 creatures that looked like a cross between cats and lizards were gathered around what appeared to be a nest. They were about the size of large dogs, with fur that changed colors, and long tails that ended in small hands. The creatures noticed Maya immediately, but did not run away. They studied her with large intelligent eyes, while making soft chirping sounds to each other. Maya realized they were having a conversation about her presence. She sat down slowly on the soft ground and waited to see what they would do. One of the creatures approached her cautiously. Its fur shifted from green to blue to purple as it came closer. Maya held very still as it sniffed her boots and backpack. When it seemed satisfied that she was not dangerous, it made a soft trilling sound to the others. Soon, all 6 creatures were gathered around Maya, examining her equipment and clothes. They seemed particularly interested in her research scanner, which beeped and flashed with different colored lights. Maya realized they were attracted to the technology, not frightened by it. She slowly reached into her pack and pulled out her lunch. The military rations were not very appetizing, but the creatures watched with great interest as she opened the sealed packages. Maya offered some of the dried fruit to the nearest creature. The creature sniffed the food carefully, then took a small bite. Its eyes widened, and it made excited sounds to the others. Soon Maya was surrounded by begging creatures who wanted to try the strange food from another world. She shared her entire lunch with them while taking careful notes about their behavior. When Maya finally returned to the research station, she was 3 hours late. Captain Torres was furious and threatened to confine her to the base for the rest of the mission. The Velinary researchers seemed amused by the humans' reckless behavior, which confirmed their beliefs about human intelligence. That night, Maya wrote detailed reports about her encounter with the creatures she had decided to call forest singers. She included behavioral observations and theories about their social structure. Her excitement was obvious in every sentence. She wrote. Dr. Kate Murphy read the reports and shook her head in disbelief. Maya had risked her life to feed snacks to alien animals. It was exactly the kind of soft-hearted behavior that would get someone killed on a death world like Cathara Prime. But deep in the forest, something much larger than forest singers was stirring. Long-range sensors had detected movement in the crystal caves that honeycombed the planet's surface. Something ancient and powerful was awakening from its long sleep. The Velinary called it the Void Stalker, and it was the reason their people had never ventured far from their protected cities. Soon everyone at the research station would learn why even the bravest Velinary warriors feared to speak its name above a whisper. The emergency alarms started blaring at dawn 3 days later. Maya woke up in her small quarters to flashing red lights and the voice of Captain Torres, ordering all personnel to battle stations. Through her window, she could see the Velinari, researchers running toward their emergency shelters with fear written across their glowing faces. Maya grabbed her research equipment out of habit and ran toward the main laboratory. In the corridor, she nearly collided with Dr. Kate Murphy, who was carrying a large plasma rifle. Kate shouted over the alarms that something big was coming through the forest, and all the sensors were going crazy. The main laboratory had been converted into a command center. Captain Torres stood in front of multiple screens, showing readings from motion detectors and thermal scanners placed throughout the forest. The displays showed a massive heat signature moving through the trees toward their location. Lirelei Moonwhisper burst through the connecting door from the Velinari section. Her crystal patterns were flashing rapid sequences of red and orange, which Maya had learned meant extreme panic. In broken English mixed with her own language, Lirelei tried to explain what was approaching them. Zephyron Silverbow arrived moments later, looking more frightened than Maya had ever seen a Velinari. His usual calm dignity was completely gone as he spoke rapidly in his musical language. The translation device could only catch fragments, but Maya heard the words, death, and ancient, and unstoppable, repeated several times. Captain Torres demanded a clear explanation of what they were dealing with. Zephyrin took several deep breaths to calm himself before switching to English. He told them about the Void Stalkers, which were the apex predators of Cathara Prime, and the reason his people had never expanded beyond their heavily defended cities. The creatures were massive hunters that stood 12 feet tall at the shoulder. They looked like a cross between the great cats of Earth and the dragons from human mythology. Most terrifying of all, they could phase partially out of normal space, which made them nearly impossible to track or fight. Maya felt her heart racing as she listened to the description. The forest singers she had befriended were like harmless pets compared to what was approaching. She asked Zephyron how many Void Stalkers usually traveled together, but his answer made everyone in the room go silent. They never traveled in groups. A single Void Stalker was powerful enough to destroy entire settlements. If the sensors were showing only one heat signature, then one creature was coming to kill them all. The screens suddenly showed movement at the edge of the cleared zone around the research station. At first, Maya could only see the silver trees, swaying as something large pushed through them. Then she saw a shadow that seemed darker than the forest around it, flowing between the tree trunks. The Void Stalker emerged from the tree line, and Maya understood why the Velinari were so terrified. The creature was enormous, with a body like a panther stretched to impossible size. Its fur was so black, it seemed to absorb light, but patterns of blue and green bioluminescence ran along its sides like living tattoos. The most disturbing feature was its ability to partially fade in and out of visibility. One moment Maya could see it clearly, and the next it became translucent like a ghost. Even the thermal sensors lost track of it when it phased too deeply into whatever dimension it could access. Captain Torres ordered her Marines to open fire with everything they had. Plasma bolts and energy beams lit up the forest as the soldiers tried to hit the phasing creature. Most shots passed harmlessly through empty air when the Void Stalker shifted out of normal space at just the right moment. A few energy bolts did hit the creature, and Maya could see them burn against its fur, but they barely seemed to slow it down. The Void Stalker let out a roar that shook the research station and made everyone cover their ears. The sound was like thunder mixed with the screams of dying metal. Sergeant Kate Murphy shouted that their weapons were useless against something that could phase out of reality. She recommended immediate evacuation while they still had time to reach the transport ships. Captain Torres agreed and started giving orders for emergency retreat procedures. But Maya was watching the Void Stalker more carefully than anyone else. While the Marines panicked and the Velinari cowered, she noticed something important about the creature's behavior. It was not attacking the station, even though it easily could have. Instead, it was circling the perimeter and sniffing the air like It was searching for something specific. The creature's bioluminescent patterns were also changing in ways that reminded Maya of communication signals. She had seen similar behavior in the forest singers when they talked to each other. Could it be possible that this terrifying predator was trying to send a message rather than hunt prey? Maya tried to share her observations, but nobody was listening. The evacuation was already underway, with Marines loading essential equipment, while the Velinary researchers sealed their most important data. Captain Torres was coordinating with the transport ships, which would arrive in 6 hours, if they were lucky. The Void Stalker suddenly stopped circling and focused its attention on one section of the forest. Its patterns shifted to rapid pulses of bright blue, and it made sounds that were different from its earlier roars. These sounds were softer and seemed almost like the calls Maya had heard from Earth animals looking for their young. Maya grabbed a pair of enhanced binoculars and focused on the area where the creature was staring. Deep in the shadows between the trees, she could see something small and pale moving weakly. It was another Void Stalker, but much smaller and clearly injured. The realization hit Maya like a physical blow. The massive creature that had terrified everyone was not a mindless killing machine. It was a mother looking for her injured cub. The cub must have wandered too close to the research station and become trapped or hurt in the defensive barriers. Maya tried again to get someone's attention, but the evacuation was proceeding at full speed. Marines were sealing blast doors and powering down systems, while the Velinary loaded their people into underground shelters. Nobody wanted to hear theories about maternal behavior in apex predators. The mother Void Stalker was becoming more agitated as she tried to reach her cub. Her roars grew louder, and her phasing became more erratic. Maya realized that if something was not done soon, the creature might become truly dangerous. A panicked mother protecting her young was far more deadly than any normal predator. Maya made a decision that everyone later agreed was completely insane. She grabbed her research pack and headed for the exit door that led into the forest. Dr. Kate Murphy tried to stop her, but Maya was already activating the emergency release that opened the blast barriers. Captain Torres shouted orders for Maya to return immediately, but she was already walking across the cleared ground toward the massive predator. The Void Stalker noticed her approach and turned its great head to study this small creature that dared to come close. Maya felt her legs shaking as she got within 50 meters of the beast. Up close she could see details that the cameras had missed. The creature's eyes were not the savage yellow of a mindless killer, but the deep blue of intelligence and concern. Its bioluminescent patterns were definitely communication attempts, and Maya wished she had time to study their meanings. The Void Stalker could have killed Maya with a single swipe of its claws, but instead, it watched her with what seemed like curiosity. Maya slowly reached into her pack and pulled out her medical scanner. She pointed it toward the area where she had seen the injured cub and activated the emergency beacon function. The scanner's lights and sounds caused the mother Void Stalker to step back, but not flee. Maya held the device steady and tried to project calm confidence, even though her heart was beating so fast she thought it might explode. She was betting her life on the theory that intelligence and maternal love were universal concepts that transcended species. Behind her at the research station, every weapon was trained on the scene. Captain Torres had her finger on the trigger of the station's main defense cannon, which could vaporize both Maya and the Void Stalker in seconds. The Velinary were sending prayers to their crystal gods while recording everything for their historians. Maya took another step toward the forest where the injured cub was hidden. The mother Void Stalker moved parallel to her, maintaining the same distance. Its patterns shifted to what Maya hoped was cautious approval, rather than preparation for attack. The next few minutes would determine whether Maya's gentle approach could succeed where weapons had failed, or whether her compassion would get everyone killed when the creature finally lost patience with human interference. Maya moved deeper into the forest with the massive Void Stalker pacing beside her like a giant shadow. Every step took her further from the safety of the research station and closer to the injured cub she had spotted through her binoculars. Behind them, she could hear Captain Torres shouting orders through her radio, but Maya had turned off her communicator to focus completely on the task ahead. The mother creature's bioluminescent patterns had shifted to steady pulses of blue and green, which Maya hoped meant acceptance rather than preparation for attack. The beast was close enough that Maya could feel the heat radiating from its body and smell its scent, which was surprisingly clean like ozone after a thunderstorm. They reached the area where Maya had seen the cub, and she immediately understood why the young Void Stalker could not escape. The small creature was caught in an energy snare that the Velinari had placed around the forest to capture specimens for study. The snare was designed to be painless, but it held the cub in a sphere of crackling energy that prevented movement. The cub was about the size of a large earth horse, but it looked tiny next to its massive mother. Its bioluminescent patterns were dim and flickering, which Maya guessed indicated pain or exhaustion. When it saw its mother approaching, the cub made soft mewing sounds that were heartbreaking to hear. Maya studied the energy snare carefully while the mother Void Stalker watched her every move. The device was Velinari technology, which meant it was incredibly advanced, but also incredibly delicate. One wrong move could either free the cub or increase the energy output enough to seriously injure the young creature. The mother began making low rumbling sounds that vibrated through Maya's chest. The sounds seemed directed at Maya rather than the cub, and the patterns on the creature's hide shifted to rapid sequences of different colors. Maya realized she was witnessing an attempt at communication between species that had never tried to understand each other before. Maya slowly approached the energy snare while speaking in a calm, steady voice. She told the mother Void Stalker what she was planning to do, even though she knew the creature could not understand English. Sometimes tone and intention were more important than actual words when dealing with intelligent animals. The snare had a manual release mechanism hidden beneath a panel of living crystal that grew over Velinari technology. Maya had learned about these devices during her orientation, but she had never actually operated one before. Her hands shook as she carefully removed the crystal covering to access the controls. Beneath, the cub watched Maya with eyes that seemed far too intelligent for such a young creature. Its patterns had begun to pulse in rhythm with its mother's, which Maya took as a sign of recognition and possibly trust. The young Void Stalker was allowing a strange alien to approach because its mother had given permission. Maya found the release sequence in her memory and began entering the proper commands. The energy snare responded by shifting its pattern and making different sounds as the power levels adjusted. For a terrifying moment, the energy around the cub flared brighter, and Maya thought she had made a critical mistake. Then the energy field collapsed completely, and the young Void Stalker stumbled forward on unsteady legs. The cub had been trapped for at least several hours, and its muscles were cramped from the forced immobility. Maya could see injuries on its legs where the energy field had burned through its fur. The mother Void Stalker rushed forward to nuzzle her cub with gentle movements that seemed impossible for such a massive predator. The reunion between mother and child was touching enough to bring tears to Maya's eyes. She realized she was witnessing something that no human or Velinari had ever seen before, but the cub's injuries needed immediate attention. Maya could see that several of the burns were deep enough to become infected if left untreated. The young creature was also dehydrated and weak from its ordeal. Without medical care, it might not survive the journey back to wherever Void Stalkers made their homes. Maya made another decision that would have been considered insane by anyone watching. She approached the injured cub with her medical kit open, and her hands extended to show she was not carrying weapons. The mother Void Stalker tensed, but did not interfere, as Maya knelt beside her wounded child. The cub allowed Maya to examine its injuries while making soft sounds of distress. Maya had treated many different species during her veterinary training on Earth, and the basic principles of wound care were universal. She cleaned the burns with antiseptic solution and applied synthetic skin patches to prevent infection. While Maya worked, the mother Voidstalker lay down beside them and watched every movement with intense concentration. Occasionally she would make soft sounds to her cub that seemed to be reassurance or encouragement. Maya found herself included in this family moment in a way that felt both miraculous and completely natural. The medical treatment took almost an hour because Maya was being extremely careful not to cause additional pain. When she finished, the cub's injuries were clean and protected, while its strength had returned enough to stand without assistance. The young Voidstalker tested its legs and seemed pleased with the results. Maya offered the cub some of her emergency rations, mixed with clean water from her supplies. The young creature sniffed the mixture carefully before taking small sips. Its mother watched this feeding with what Maya could only describe as gratitude in her massive blue eyes. As the cub recovered its strength, both mother and child began displaying new patterns of bioluminescence that Maya had not seen before. The patterns seemed to include Maya in their visual conversation, and she realized she was being formally introduced to the family unit as a trusted friend rather than a potential threat. Maya spent the rest of the day observing and documenting the behavior of both Voidstalkers. She discovered that their bioluminescent patterns were indeed a complex language with specific meanings for different color combinations and pulse patterns. Their intelligence was clearly equal to that of the Velinari, and possibly superior in some ways. When evening approached, the mother, Voidstalker, began making sounds that Maya interpreted as preparation for departure. The cub was strong enough to travel, and they needed to return to their territory before other predators detected their vulnerability. Maya understood that this magical interlude was coming to an end, but as the two Voidstalkers prepared to leave, the mother approached Maya one final time. The massive creature lowered her great head until she was at eye level with the small human who had helped her child. For a long moment they stared at each other across the vast gulf between species. Then the mother Voidstalker did something that changed everything. She gently touched Maya's forehead with her nose in what was clearly a gesture of recognition and acceptance. The bioluminescent patterns on her face pulsed once in a sequence that Maya somehow knew meant gratitude and friendship. The mother and cub disappeared into the forest, leaving Maya alone with the most profound experience of her scientific career. She had not only survived an encounter with the most feared predator on Kythera Prime, but had actually gained their trust and respect through compassion rather than force. Maya walked back toward the research station knowing that everything had changed. The Velinari belief that Voidstalkers were mindless killers was completely wrong. These creatures were intelligent beings with complex social structures and emotional bonds. The implications for both human and Velinari understanding of this world were staggering. At the research station, Captain Torres and the Velinari researchers were waiting with expressions of disbelief and concern. Maya's radio had been silent for 8 hours, and many people had assumed the worst. Now she returned uninjured and carrying data that would revolutionize xenobiology. But Maya knew that convincing others to accept her discoveries would be the hardest challenge yet. The fear and prejudice against Voidstalkers ran deep in Velinari culture, while human military doctrine demanded the elimination of apex predators. Maya would need all her gentle persistence to change minds that had been closed for generations. Maya had been documenting her daily interactions with the Voidstalker she now called Luna for 2 weeks when the ground began to shake. The tremors started as barely noticeable vibrations that made the research equipment rattle on the laboratory tables. Within hours, they had grown into violent earthquakes that cracked the walls of both human and Velinari buildings. Dr. Kate Murphy was running seismic analysis programs when she discovered the terrifying truth about what was happening deep beneath Kythera Prime. The earthquake patterns showed that something massive was moving through the planet's crystal cave networks. Not something, but many things, all awakening at the same time, after what appeared to be centuries of hibernation. Zephyrin Silverbow arrived at the human laboratory with his face pale and his crystal patterns flickering in sequences that Maya had learned meant absolute terror. Through the translation system, his words came out in broken fragments, but the meaning was clear. An entire clan of Voidstalkers was waking up from deep sleep, and they would emerge angry and confused. Captain Torres immediately began emergency protocols to evacuate all personnel from Kythera Prime. The transport ships could reach them in 18 hours if they launched immediately from the nearest space station. But 18 hours might be too long if dozens of apex predators emerged from the caves looking for territory and prey. Maya tried to explain that the Voidstalkers were intelligent creatures who could be reasoned with if approached correctly. She showed them her research data about Luna's communication patterns and social behaviors. But Captain Torres and the Velinari researchers dismissed her findings as wishful thinking from someone who had gotten lucky once. Relay supported Maya's theories, but she was overruled by Elder Celestine Starweaver, who declared that approaching a clan of awakened Voidstalkers would be suicide. The Velinari had ancient records of similar awakenings that had destroyed entire cities before the creatures returned to their deep slumber. The seismic sensors detected the first emergence 6 hours after the evacuation order was given. A massive Voidstalker pushed up through the crystal caves near the old Velinari mining settlement of Crystal Falls. The creature was even larger than Luna, and its bioluminescent patterns pulsed with aggressive red and orange colors. Within the next 2 hours, 5 more Voidstalkers had emerged at different locations across the continent. The creatures were spreading out to claim territory, which put them on a collision course with both the research station and the main Velinari city of Silver Heights. Military estimates suggested that conventional weapons would be useless against so many phasing predators. Maya watched the tactical displays with growing desperation as the evacuation proceeded around her. Luna had been visiting the research station daily since Maya helped her cub, but she had not appeared since the earthquakes began. Maya suspected that Luna was dealing with the crisis in her own territory and might have answers about communicating with the awakened clan. As the largest Voidstalker approached, within 10 kilometers of the research station, Maya made the most important decision of her life. She announced that she was going to find Luna and attempt to negotiate with the Clan Alpha before the situation became a massacre for both species. Captain Torres threatened to confine Maya to quarters for her own safety. The idea of sending one small human to face a clan of apex predators was beyond reckless. Dr. Kate Murphy supported the captain and pointed out that Maya's previous success might have been a fluke that would not work twice. Zephyrinsil was torn between his scientific curiosity and his people's ancient fears. Part of him wanted to see if Maya's theories about Voidstalker intelligence were correct, but he could not risk the lives of his research team on such a desperate gamble. Elder Celestine made the decision for him by ordering all Velinari to retreat to their deepest shelters. Maya ignored the orders and restrictions placed on her movements. While the Marines were busy loading equipment, she slipped out of the research station, through a maintenance exit that opened into the forest. Her research pack contained everything she needed to survive in the wilderness, plus her accumulated data about Voidstalker behavior patterns. The forest felt different as Maya made her way toward Luna's territory. The usual sounds of smaller creatures were absent, and even the plants seemed to be reacting to the presence of so many apex predators. The silver trees had retracted their leaves, and the ground cover plants had closed their flowers as if preparing for a storm. Maya found Luna in a clearing where she had never seen the creature before. The massive Voidstalker was pacing back and forth while making deep rumbling sounds that seemed to be directed at the forest around her. Her bioluminescent patterns were unlike anything Maya had observed during their previous encounters. When Luna noticed Maya approaching, her patterns shifted to rapid pulses of blue and green, mixed with flashes of red. Maya interpreted this as recognition, combined with warning or concern. Luna was glad to see her human friend, but she was also trying to communicate that the situation was extremely dangerous. Maya approached slowly while speaking in the calm voice she always used with Luna. She explained that she understood about the clan awakening, and that she wanted to help prevent violence between the species. Luna listened to the tone and emotion in Maya's voice even though she could not understand the words. Luna's patterns gradually shifted to steadier blues and greens as she accepted Maya's presence. Then the massive creature did something she had never done before. She lowered herself to the ground and made sounds that Maya recognized as an invitation to climb onto her back. Maya felt her heart racing as she realized what Luna was offering. The Voidstalker wanted to carry her to meet the Clan Alpha, which would be the ultimate test of interspecies trust. Maya could be riding toward her death, or toward the most important diplomatic contact in galactic history. The journey through the forest on Luna's back was like nothing Maya had ever experienced. The massive creature moved with silent grace through terrain that would have been impossible for a human to cross. Her ability to partially phase out of normal space allowed her to pass through obstacles that should have blocked their path. They traveled for 3 hours before reaching the ancient crystal formations where the Clan Alpha had emerged. The area looked like a cathedral made of living crystal with spires that reached toward the alien sky. In the center of this natural temple stood the largest Voidstalker Maya had ever seen. The alpha female was nearly twice Luna's size with bioluminescent patterns that covered her entire body in complex geometric designs. Her patterns pulsed with slow rhythms that reminded Maya of a heartbeat or breathing. This was clearly a creature of immense age and power who had survived countless challenges to become the leader of her clan. Luna approached the Alpha with submissive postures while making soft sounds that Maya guessed were formal greetings in Voidstalker language. The Alpha studied both Luna and her small human passenger with eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of centuries. Maya slid down from Luna's back and stood before the Clan Alpha, knowing that the next few minutes would determine the fate of 3 different species. She had no weapons and no backup plan beyond her belief that intelligence and compassion could bridge any gap between thinking beings. The Alpha Void Stalker lowered her massive head to study Maya more closely. Her patterns shifted through sequences that seemed to be questions or challenges. Maya realized she was being tested to prove that she was worthy of the Alpha's attention and possibly her protection. Maya began to speak about the research station and the Velinary city, explaining that both contained people who meant no harm to the Voidstalker clan. She used every communication technique she had learned while working with Luna, including hand gestures and changes in voice tone to convey meaning beyond words. The Alpha listened to Maya's presentation with the patience of a creature that had lived for centuries. When Maya finished speaking, the Alpha made a series of sounds that were clearly directed at Luna rather than the human. Luna responded with her own complex patterns and sounds in what appeared to be a detailed conversation. Maya watched this exchange between the 2 Voidstalkers, knowing that her fate and the fate of everyone on Cathara Prime was being decided in a language she barely understood. She could only hope that Luna was presenting her case effectively to the ancient clan leader. Finally, the Alpha turned her attention back to Maya and made a single deep sound that seemed to come from the core of her massive body. The sound was followed by a pattern of lights that pulsed once across her entire hide before returning to the slow, steady rhythm Maya had first observed. Luna's patterns immediately shifted to excited blues and greens as she nuzzled Maya gently with her great head. Maya realized that some kind of agreement had been reached, but she was not sure what it meant or what would happen next. The test was far from over. 3 months after the awakening crisis, Maya stood in the newly expanded research facility watching Luna play with her cub in the specially designed habitat that had been built between the human and Velinary sections. The young Voidstalker had grown considerably and now stood almost as tall as Maya herself, but it still acted like a playful child when its mother was nearby. The habitat was a marvel of interspecies cooperation. Human engineers had provided the structural framework, while Velinary artists had grown living crystal formations that provided both beauty and functionality. The Voidstalkers had contributed their own modifications by creating phase tunnels that allowed them to move between different sections without using the normal entrances. Captain Torres approached Maya, carrying a datapad filled with requests from Colonial Command. Every week brought new messages from worlds that were dealing with their own predator problems. News of Maya's success on Kythera Prime had spread throughout human space, and everyone wanted her expertise in dealing with dangerous alien species. Maya reviewed the latest requests while scratching Luna behind her massive ears. The gesture would have been considered suicidal 3 months ago, but now it was as natural as petting a house cat. Luna purred with sounds that vibrated through the ground and made her bioluminescent patterns pulse with contentment. Dr. Kate Murphy joined them, carrying her own collection of scientific papers that were revolutionizing the field of xenobiology. Maya's discoveries about Voidstalker intelligence and communication had provided the foundation for an entirely new approach to studying alien predators. Instead of viewing them as mindless killing machines, researchers were now looking for signs of intelligence and social structure. The academic community had initially been skeptical of Maya's reports, but the evidence was overwhelming. Video recordings showed Voidstalkers using tools to modify their environment and working together to solve complex problems. Their bioluminescent language had been partially decoded, revealing a communication system more sophisticated than many known alien species. Zevran Silverbow arrived for the daily planning meeting carrying crystalline data storage devices that contained the latest updates from Velinary research teams. His people had been forced to completely revise their understanding of their own planet's ecosystem. The Voidstalkers were not invaders or monsters, but the original intelligent inhabitants of Kythera Prime Lirale. Moonwhisper had become Maya's closest collaborator among the Velinary researchers. Her natural curiosity had overcome her people's ancient fears, and she now worked directly with the Voidstalker clan to map the extensive cave networks beneath the planet's surface. The caves contained crystal formations, unlike anything seen before, including some that seemed to be grown rather than naturally formed. Elder Celestine Starweaver had been the last holdout against the new cooperation, but even she had been forced to admit that Maya's approach was producing remarkable results. The research station was now gathering more scientific data in a month than they had collected in the previous 3 years. More importantly, they were doing it safely, with 0 casualties from predator attacks. The Alpha Voidstalker that Maya had named Shadow Queen had become the unofficial leader of the Interspecies Council that governed the expanded research project. Her ancient wisdom and deep understanding of Kythera Prime's ecosystem made her invaluable in planning safe exploration of previously forbidden areas. She communicated primarily through Luna, who had become the primary translator between species. Maya's daily routine now included teaching sessions where she helped both humans and Velinary learn basic Voidstalker communication patterns. The bioluminescent language was complex, but logical, and several researchers had achieved basic conversational ability. The breakthrough had come when they realized that the patterns were 3-dimensional with meaning encoded in depth and intensity as well as color and timing. The forest singers that Maya had first encountered were now regular visitors to the research station. Their pack had grown to include over 30 individuals who served as intermediaries between the researchers and the smaller creatures of the forest. Through them, Maya had learned that Kythera Prime contained dozens of intelligent species that had been overlooked because they did not build cities or use technology in recognizable ways. Captain Torres had adapted her security protocols to accommodate the new reality of working alongside apex predators. Her Marines now carried non-lethal weapons designed for crowd control rather than hunting dangerous game. The Voidstalkers had proven to be better guards than any human security system could provide, and their presence kept genuinely dangerous creatures away from the research areas. Maya's research notes had become the foundation for a new field called empathetic xenobiology, which emphasized understanding alien psychology and social structures rather than just cataloging physical characteristics. Universities throughout human space were establishing new programs based on her methodologies and requesting guest lectures from the woman who had befriended the monsters. The success on Cathara Prime had attracted attention from the highest levels of both human and Velinary governments. Diplomatic teams were arriving next month to formalize the interspecies cooperation agreements and establish the planet as a model for peaceful coexistence. Maya found the political attention overwhelming, but she understood its importance for future exploration missions. Luna's cub had been given a name sparked by the Velinary because of the particularly bright patterns it displayed when excited. Spark had become the unofficial mascot of the research station and was learning to communicate with multiple species simultaneously. The young Voidstalker was developing linguistic abilities that surprised even Maya with their sophistication and creativity. The crystal caves discovered by the awakened clan contained artifacts that suggested Voidstalker civilization was far older than anyone had imagined. Some of the crystal formations appeared to be libraries or archives containing information stored in mineral matrices that could last for millions of years. Translating these archives would likely take decades, but the initial discoveries had already rewritten the history of the galaxy. Maya often reflected on how much had changed since her arrival on Cathara Prime. The shy botanist, who had been considered too soft for Deathworld research, was now the most requested xenobiologist in known space. Her gentle approach had not only saved lives, but had opened doors to understanding that military force could never have achieved. Standing in the observation deck watching 3 different species work together on projects that benefited everyone, Maya felt a deep satisfaction that went beyond professional success. She had proven that strength came in many forms, and that sometimes the greatest power lay in the willingness to extend trust to those who seemed dangerous or alien. Luna approached the observation deck and pressed her great head against the reinforced window, making soft sounds of greeting. Maya placed her hand against the crystal barrier, knowing that Luna could see the gesture, even if she could not feel the touch. The bond between them had become a symbol of what was possible when beings chose understanding over fear. The communication device on Maya's belt chimed with an incoming message from Earth. Colonial Command was formally requesting her services for a newly discovered world where human colonists were being attacked by creatures they described as living shadows that could walk through walls. Maya smiled as she realized that somewhere in the galaxy, another group of researchers was about to learn that their monsters might actually be misunderstood neighbors. She looked out at the thriving research community that had grown around the foundation of interspecies trust and cooperation. Human children from the support staff played games with young Velinary, while forest singers provided running commentary in their musical language. Voidstalkers moved through the complex like gentle giants, offering assistance with heavy lifting or hard-to-reach equipment. Maya had found her calling in the space between species where fear met understanding and chose trust instead. The woman, they had said, was too soft for a death world, had discovered that sometimes softness was exactly what a hard world needed to become something better. Her legacy would not be measured in creatures defeated, but in relationships built and fears overcome through the simple power of compassion extended across the vast distances between different forms of life.